Five dead and 32 injured after a coach rammed into a stopped taxi on Chongqing Highway.
I think we're very close to doing something with China, but I don't know that I want to do it.
Donald Trump sends mixed signals about the prospects for a trade deal with China ahead of a meeting with Xi Jinping in Argentina.
Good evening. 5 people died and 32 others were injured after a coach rammed into a taxi that was stopped on Chongqing Highway this morning. 5 of the injured are still in hospitals this evening, including the coach driver, who remains in critical condition. Our Caleb Leung has our top story.
The aftermath of a traffic accident at the Northwest Qingyi interchange. At around 5 a.m., a coach heading to the airport slammed into the back of a taxi that had stopped in the slow lane of Chongqing Highway. The coach was carrying 36 passengers. Half of them are Cathay Pacific staff, while the rest also work at the airport. 3 passengers died at the scene after being thrown out of the coach. The taxi driver was trapped inside the vehicle. He was later certified dead at hospital. The only passenger on board the taxi, a German man, sustained minor injuries. According to the police, closed-circuit TV footage shows the taxi had stopped on the road with its hazard lights on. 40 seconds later, the coach rammed into the back of the taxi, then hit the central divider of the highway and the roadside curb on the left before coming to a halt. A police officer said the coach driver appeared to have failed to notice the stopped taxi. The 62-year-old coach driver was also said to have worked for 10 hours into his shift at the time. Kunshan Bus Group, which operates the coach service, said the driver started work at 7 p.m. last night. He finished the trip and then took a 4-hour rest. He was on the road again at around 1 a.m. At 4 a.m., he took the coach to East Kowloon to pick up passengers before heading to the airport. The coach was traveling at 70 kilometers per hour at the time of the crash, lower than the speed limit of 80. Kunshan's chairman Matthew Wong confirmed the driver received a warning letter in relation to another incident that left around a dozen people injured back in February. He was also driving an overnight airport-bound bus at the time. Cathay Pacific confirmed 2 of the fatal victims were members of its staff.
I would particularly like to extend my condolences to the families and friends of the 2 people who died in the accident this morning, the deceased.
The chief executive is saddened by the tragedy.
It is premature to draw any conclusion, and that's why it is not appropriate for the government to suggest what sort of remedial measures that we should take.
Senior government officials were at Princess Margaret Hospital this morning to visit the injured. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Police suggested that those who lost their lives in the bus crash may not have worn their seatbelts. Kayla Chu has more.
Those thrown out of the vehicle during this morning's deadly bus crash may have very likely not fastened their seatbelts, according to the police. Under the road traffic ordinance, seatbelts must be installed in every seat of private cars, taxis, and minibuses. The same requirement, however, has not been extended to cover buses and coaches. While seatbelts were installed in the tour bus involved in today's accident, passengers are not required by law to wear them. Ringo Lee, president of the Hong Kong Automobile Association, said the government should review existing laws and make it mandatory for passengers to wear seatbelts on buses and coaches. He also noted that passengers should avoid sleeping in vehicles as they may fail to react immediately during accidents. The Transport Department will be meeting with the Public Omnibus Operators Association to review operational safety issues of non-franchised public buses. All franchised bus companies have agreed to install seatbelts in their new buses from July. Kayna Chu, TVB News.
Heads of state from the world's leading economies are in Argentina for the G20 summit to discuss issues like development, infrastructure and investment. One of the highlights of the summit, however, is a meeting between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. They will discuss the trade war between the world's two biggest economies. Alan Buchnier reports.
President Xi Jinping is set to meet with Donald Trump on Saturday evening as the two try to ease tensions over the tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of goods the two countries have slapped on each other. The China Daily said a trade agreement can be reached if Washington is fair-minded. But before leaving for Argentina, Trump appeared to be in no hurry to strike a deal.
I think we're very close to doing something with China, but I don't know that I want to do it, because what we have right now is billions and billions of dollars coming into the United States in the form of tariffs or taxes. So I really don't know, but I will tell you that I think China wants to make a deal. I'm open to making a deal, but frankly, I like the deal we have right now.
Also expected to loom large amid the dozens of bilateral meetings is the gruesome slaying of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which U.S. intelligence agencies concluded was ordered by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia has denied his involvement, but some leaders may be cool towards him at the G20 meeting to avoid seeming to legitimize him.
Sur laquelle je souhaite que toute la vérité soit faite.
French President Emmanuel Macron called for international involvement and complete clarity in the investigations into the killing. The meeting's host, Argentine President Mauricio Macri, said the matter would be on the table. Outside, hundreds marched to speak out against hosting the event as the country wrestles with a failing economy. Making an appearance at the demonstrations was the baby Trump blimp, which has appeared in several countries recently, visited by the American president. Alan Buchnier, TVB News.
More details are emerging about how that naval clash between Russia and Ukraine went down. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump cancels his G20 meeting with Russia's president over the crisis. Ukraine's intelligence agency explains exactly who opened fire on 3 Ukrainian naval vessels before they were seized and their crew captured near Russia-occupied Crimea. The deputy head of security in Ukraine says a Russian Su-30 fighter jet and a Ka-52 attack helicopter fired 4 rockets on the ships. He also claims right after Russian border guard ships rammed the Ukrainian ships, they also fired on them. Russia is adamant the vessels were violating their border and deliberately provoked Russian forces on Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko's direction. Poroshenko denies that and says it's clear Russian President Vladimir Putin triggered the trouble.
I called to Putin immediately at the night when it happened. And until now, Putin did not answer me. And this is just an evidence that this aggression was approved and blessed by personally Mr. Putin. And definitely it would be a responsibility on for these things.
All this comes as Ukraine fears Russia is preparing to go to war with them. It's now deployed a new battalion of advanced S-400 surface-to-air missile systems in Crimea. The missiles can hit targets up to 30 kilometers high with speeds of up to 2,700 kilometers per hour. This is why the Ukrainian military is running drills on land and in the air modeled on the event of Russia invading Ukraine. President Poroshenko is also urging NATO to deploy warships to the Sea of Azov. NATO has rejected the idea because such a deployment could trigger even more confrontation with Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about a Trump business deal in Russia. Cohen lied when he failed to disclose Trump's plans to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That information could conflict with the answers Trump provided in the probe to determine if he had colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. Cohen now claims the real estate project took place when Trump was running for president. Trump admits the only thing he discussed with Cohen is not doing the project. He called Cohen a liar and a weak man.
Everybody knew about it. It was written about in newspapers. It was a well-known project. It was during the early part of 16. I decided not to do the project, so I didn't do it. So we're not talking about doing a project. We're talking about not doing a project. He was given a fairly long jail sentence, and he's a weak person. I decided ultimately not to do it. There would have been nothing wrong if I did do it. If I did do it, there would have been nothing wrong. That was my business. So he's lying very simply to get a reduced sentence, okay?
German Chancellor Angela Merkel will miss the opening of the G20 summit in Argentina after her plane had to make an emergency landing in Cologne. The government's Airbus A340 aircraft landed about an hour into the 15-hour flight because of what Merkel called a serious malfunction. The pilot said there were problems with several electronic systems. She and her entourage stayed in the plane as mechanics inspected its brakes and fire engines waited nearby. After about an hour, Merkel and her delegation deplaned and boarded a bus to take them to a hotel.
Still ahead in our newscast, the government begins enforcing a ban on alcohol sales to minors. The Gaza Strip's only grand piano now at the center of a bitter ownership dispute. And a sneak peek of the Hong Kong News Expo ahead of its opening next Wednesday.
我哋 NOC 係負責監察網絡質量，世界各地嘅漫遊信號我哋都監察到。有咩突發事故，甚至乎係天災，如果當地嘅網絡受到影響，我哋就要立即應對。
check 到你個 roaming partner 冇受影響，
即刻轉過去。無論係出外公幹或者係旅遊嘅客戶，同外界聯繫就靠晒我哋，所以確保網絡暢通係最重要㗎。
IDD 接通返。
喺本地網絡服務方面，我哋喺全港有接近3000個基站，每一個我哋都會全天候24小時監察住。試過有次8號風球冇得返屋企，下一間同事又返唔到，連踩2間，攰㗎。不過我哋職責就係要緊守崗位，
所以辛苦啲都唔會計嘅。更何況仲有其他隊員同我一齊作戰㗎嘛。
Welcome back. The government today began enforcing a new law that bans the sale and supply of alcohol to minors. However, as Christy Leung reports, some retailers seem to be unfamiliar with the ban.
Beginning today, you may come across this sign at stores selling alcoholic beverages. That is, businesses are required to display signs about the new ban at prominent locations. The new law prohibits the sale and supply of alcoholic beverages to anyone under 18 years old. It means beverages that have more than 1.2% of alcohol by volume, such as beer and red wine. However, no signs can be found in this grocery store, while even the owner wasn't aware of the new law. A retailer found the new law confusing. That is, some seasonings also contain alcohol, but the amount is not specified on the labels. I'm not sure if it is covered under the new law, so I will not sell them to minors, just to play safe.
For the soy sauce, it is not used for the alcoholic beverage, and then it may be excluded from our new legislation. But of course, it depends on the situations and also depends on its usage and content of this soy sauce.
Dr. Lee added that even though some Chinese wines such as rice wine are commonly used as seasonings, they are also covered under the law. That is, some people consume them as alcoholic beverages. The new law also covers online stores. These sellers are also required to collect an age declaration from their customers before going ahead with the sale and product delivery. Officials have reminded retailers that even upon delivery, they have to check the recipient's age. The maximum fine for breaking the new law is $50,000 on summary conviction. Christy Leung, TVB News.
Occupy co-founder Chan Kim-man has testified that protesters came out on their own free will and were not incited by him or others. That comment came during a public nuisance trial against him and 8 other Occupy participants. Haley Zhou has more.
Chan Kim-man defended himself at the trial today, saying when he first saw police firing tear gas on September 28th, he asked protesters to leave immediately. Chan claimed it was decided in the planning stage that when police used tear gas, they would evacuate people to ensure safety. He said people first feared and left, but they came back next morning. Gerard McCoy, Chan's lawyer, asked him if he attracted or incited people to come back. Chan said he did not, and that people came back on their own will. He said after many people were injured in tear gas explosions, Occupy founders tried to expedite dialogue with the government. Chan said he had talks with the then Chief Secretary Carrie Lam over the phone. Lam asked him how this crisis could be resolved. He said then Chief Executive Lon Chun-ing or the Commissioner of Police should step down. Lam said it was out of her capacity. Then Chan suggested to form an independent committee to investigate on whether the use of tear gas on peaceful protesters was a right decision. Lam said she could consider it. Chan said the remaining conversation was about how to promote dialogue with student leaders. To assist his testimony, the court played a documentary film of the Occupy movement for about an hour.
Chan said he co-founded Occupy Central with love and peace, genuinely out of his love for Hong Kong, a place where he was born and emotionally attached to, just as the name of the campaign suggested. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The topping out ceremony for the M+ building in the West Kowloon Cultural District took place this morning.
1, 2, 3.
The ceremony was officiated by key members of the project. They included Victor Loh, chairman of the M+ board, and Duncan Pescott, CEO of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. A 16-story architecture, the M+ building has a total floor area of some 65,000 square meters. Its LED facade will display moving image works. Facilities inside the building include the library, an archive, a study center, museum, offices and restaurants. The building is expected to be completed by the end of next year and open to the public in 2020.
Days after a concert was held to unveil the Gaza Strip's only grand piano, it's now the subject of a bitter battle over ownership. A local businessman claims he owns the piano. Saeed Herzala says he loaned it to the Gaza's only music school for their concert. He says it belongs to him because it was on a resort that he purchased back in 2011. But Japan donated the black Yamaha 20 years ago when Gaza was governed by the Palestinian Authority. The piano was nearly destroyed in Israeli airstrikes during wars in 2008 and 2014. Now it remains locked up until a court can decide who's the rightful owner. And finally, a former wet market in Central was renovated into a news museum. The former Bridges Street Market was categorized as a Grade 3 historic building. That's before being revitalized as the Hong Kong News Expo. It now showcases news gathering equipment as well as scripts from the past. There are also copies of newspapers that have long been out of circulation. For visitors to have a feel of a journalist, the expo has a broadcast studio for them to try out. The facility will officially enter service next Wednesday. It will be open 6 days a week with free admission. And that